I'm Jims Marchang. I'm from Sheffield Hallam University. I'm a senior lecturer in cybersecurity, and I co-lead the Digital AI Robotics in Advanced Health and Wellbeing Research Center. And for the last around 4 years to five, I've been focusing my research on care robots. So I hope, I don't know how interesting I can make it. As an academic, we always tend to go into the research and other stuff, probably sometimes which can be a little bit boring. But let's see how it goes and see how we can make it interesting about the care robot and how we can make it safe and secure to make it, acceptable and probably safe to adopt. So interestingly, when I don't know if you have read this fictional book of Handbook of Robotics, 56th edition, 2058 AD. It's a very interesting book, and it has listed some interesting laws, which I feel it's very exciting because without this tree law, probably whatever we are thinking of building, a robot, who will help us, support us, and do things for us, might not become a real reality, but probably might end up acting like an adversary to us. So if we look at this three laws, it's very interesting because it says robots may not, or in fact should not, injure or harm human being or allow, being to come to harm to humans. So that's the first law for the robot to understand what his job should be and what he's supposed to do when he's serving, protecting, and guiding and giving service to human beings. And the second law is also very interesting because it says a robot must obey the orders given by the human being, except that it should not contradict or conflict with the first law. And the third one is very interesting because it's a robot must protect itself and on or for its own existence, provided it doesn't conflict with the first or the second law, where we ensure that it doesn't harm human being or in fact obeys all the time, but by following the first law, which doesn't include harming human beings. So when we look at these three laws, like if we look at the reality of how people are building robots, I think we are not really adhering or following these laws of this interesting book, because in the future what I see is people working in a military department will build for probably defending and harming and destroying, and then people who are working on care, thinking of this tree law as a ways and means in order to provide the kind of service and care that we are looking for from a robot. So it's very interesting how the way how people look at designing this robot and how they are intending to. But for a care robot, I really believe this tree law, and in fact for every robot, but specifically for the care robot, if we don't adhere to these three laws that is provided, I think it will be a disaster. So let's try to have a bit of a story and understand why it would be a disaster if we do not have these three laws put in place in terms of protecting and providing security and safeguarding probably the data, the robot, the services, and so on. So when we talk about the care robot, so this is the care robot that we have that I'm working with here in our lab. So it's a care robot. It's a very interesting robot, which is really expensive. It costs nearly 200,000 pounds, but it does very little from what we are expecting from a care robot. But it is a research-based related care robot. So as we are working, we are expecting, this kind of robot to have an intelligence to be able to support elderly people, probably disabled people, and improve their overall well-being, and then probably provide a better quality of life in whatever they are doing. Things probably that they can't do, helping them to do, assisting them to do, things they can't remember, probably about medication, about health monitoring, the robot or the care robot probably providing. And in terms of the social, emotional support that we need when we are living alone, and those are the kind of things that we think of when we think of a care robot. So it's very interesting because this care robot is actually dealing with this sensitive and private data, dealing with these vulnerable people. that's why this care robot is very special when we compare to any kind of robot, because this is the robot that is actually collecting our private, sensitive, personal information, knowing about what we eat, when we wake up, what we do, what medicine we take, about our health, about our well-being, about my likes, about my dislike, my social behavior. All these things are being collected by this care robot. So there is a real duty of care that we have to undertake when we really have to deploy this kind of robot, because we are dealing with vulnerable people. In a sense, let's say if someone is elderly or someone is disabled, and we can understand, if we are talking about all those challenges in terms of security application that are deployed. When Anthony was talking about, think about this kind of system that is providing service to elderly people, probably who can't even remember a password, probably who doesn't know even how to update the system. So when we are providing a service through care robot, we have to take that extra step in order to ensure that this sensitive and private information is intact. Otherwise, it's not going to be safe to adopt, because my privacy will get leaked. My data will not be secure. So there are a lot of things that will come along if we don't take care of. So because of that, we have to have that duty of care and take one more step ahead with comparing with the rest of the other robots in order to ensure and protect this sensitive and private data and services that Care Robot is delivering to the elderly people. So, in terms of data and service safety, uh, there are two things that there are many things that is important, but there are two things that is very critical once the system is in my house, probably, and say I'm using it. So there are two things, or if it is deployed in a hospital or care environment, these two things always has to be there. So if it is not there, it's not going to be safe for me to use this system, because this system is dealing with the sensitive and private information of the user. So we must have a way of verifying the user, be it a primary or any other user, or be it a doctor or a nurse or a carer. I must have, as a robot, have a way of verifying each of this user, so that only authorized individuals are able to get the service or be able to interact and get the service that is relating to this user, which is private. If somebody is asking the date and time and the day, probably that's not a problem. But the problem comes when it is dealing with the private, sensitive, personal information of this user. So we must have a mechanism in order to verify each of the user. So it's very interesting. Some people would say, "Oh, I can just adopt any, probably password based, or probably just a facial scan and face recognition or fingerprint scan." Sounds very simple and easy, but as we are working with this robot, we understand, and I'll tell some of the stories as well. So we understand that it's not as easy as we think, because some of those methods and techniques that we have been using might not be even adoptable or usable in the context, in the places and environment, and the people who wants to use this service. So that's something that we will discuss as the talk goes on, or as a discussion goes on. And the second one is the accessing the control. So it's like, when we think about accessing the control, it's because, like, what information is this robot going to share? Whom is he going to share? How much should I share? Does he understand the context and the environment in which this robot is being deployed? And there are a lot of other things that needs to be considered or taken into account in order to make that exchange and communication interaction safe, both for the user as well as the data and services that the robot is having. And one interesting aspect when we look at it is, because it always, we talk about this privacy, and there are a lot of us, our colleague here, dealing with privacy related, and it's very interesting. And it's very interesting because privacy is not something that we can blanket, like things that cannot be just say, "Oh, I'm applying this rule and method everywhere." It doesn't work like that. Why it doesn't work is because it's very much like sensitivity is really not cannot be generalized. It's something that is very subjective in nature. Something that I consider private might not be something that someone else has considered private, probably based on their belief, but probably based on their culture, probably based on the tradition, probably based on the legal, political, social acceptance. So there are a lot of interesting stuff that comes into picture when we talk about the privacy aspect. So we cannot just blanket and say, oh, this is how we deploy things in Europe under GDPR and try to deploy it in Saudi Arabia. It will not work. So with one of our PhD students, we are working on trying to understand privacy in Saudi Arabian context. So if we have to deploy this robot, how do we deploy it so that the people there feel that, okay, my right has been protected, my privacy has been protected? Because the context of their privacy and the legal, the political, the social acceptance, the tradition will be very different. So when we want to blanket one solution to the rest of the other area, it doesn't work. And another one interesting thing when we are exploring about privacy is it's something like if I want a better service or a quality service, then I somehow have to compromise my privacy. So if I say I will not provide any information, then probably I will not get any service. The more I expose to the privacy of relating to my, let's say, my data, probably I will get a better service. So if I go to a doctor, and then if I reveal all the details about my past history, about my medication, probably it will be easier for him to tell what action he needs to take. So, but if I don't tell anything, probably then he has to do 100 more tests in order to understand what treatment he has to give. So privacy is like kind of fighting against the quality of service. So but it also has to link with the rights of the user. So if he doesn't want it, then we say, that's it. I don't want to get this treatment. I don't want to get this service. I will not give you this data. So when we talk of all these things, this needs to be embedded with the care robot, because the care robot is interacting, let's say, with the care provider, it's interacting with the doctor, it's interacting with the nurse. So it should be this person or the user, the primary user, who should have the right in order to determine what data is to be shared, what data has to be given, and what data has to be revealed or made it public or make it private or shared to whom, at what level, and so on. So it's a very interesting area which we need to really explore in depth. Otherwise, we can't blanket things that might work as a care robot here in Europe will not work in Saudi Arabia or will not work in another country, and so on. So it's very interesting area that we need to explore further. Just by saying one regulation might not apply to another country having different regulation. So when we were exploring, as we can imagine, like there are all these like password related or card related way of authenticating or verifying the user. And most of the time, the things that we have is just one-time verification of the identity claim that is made. But the care robot, like it will become like an our desktop, just we log in with a password and it's open, and then anybody can just come in and start typing and asking information. So for a care robot, we can't do that. So we have to think a way how to really ensure that the verification process is not just taking place just at one event and just forget about it for the next entire 30-minute or 15-minute session. So it should be a way of monitoring, understanding the context, understanding the way how the user is, or if the user is in front. So if you think of this, so we were trying to play around with the facial recognition. And the biggest problem is, as we can understand, is a line of sight kind of thing. So you have to be in front of the camera all the time in order to continuously check if it is you. And that is not realistic when we have to deploy, because you now, if I want a service, I want to be free. I want to walk around. I want to go to kitchen. I want to go and open my fridge. I want to come back. I want to go upstairs. I want to come down. So if we just say facial recognition, so it becomes a little bit unusable. But probably for the first time, initial first states, that is fine. But for the continual monitoring, it becomes very, very difficult and become unrealistic as well. So if we do password and the card, I tried with the card as well. But some of the people, when they did the survey, it was very interesting because if I forget the card, what will happen? You know, if I drop the card, what will happen? If I lost it, what will happen? So as we are looking for a solution that can be used by elderly or disabled people. So we have to think for them. So it should not be something like this is the most secure way, and it is probably true, and also it is something that you and I can use as an with a sound mind, with the skills that is required, with the mind and memory that we can remember. But when we think of deploying, we have to think for those end user. So when we are designing the security mechanism or authentication verification mechanism or technique, we have to think for the from the user's perspective. So one of the things that they realize is, what if I don't carry anything? In fact, we started with something that we can carry. So we started with a smartphone, and then smartphone interacting with the care robot. So, but he doesn't want to carry the phone all the time. You see, so the reality is very different from what we think is a solution. So, or then we started playing with a smartwatch. What if you want to, wear the smartwatch, and through the smartwatch we'll interact and we will authenticate you. And then you'll say, oh, I don't want to wear it. So we are say kind of, if you want me to have this care robot to get a service, then you are forcing me to buy a smartwatch, and you're forcing me to wear something which I don't want to wear. And then I'm also like that. I don't want to wear anything on my, I'm working with this, but I don't want to wear a smartwatch all the time. And in fact, I don't wear even a watch. So there are people who wouldn't want it. And we can't force them to do it. So in that kind of situation, what kind of solution is the best way? So it was interesting. Some people say, "Oh, why not we do you voice?" And we tried with voice as well. But as you know, the problem with the voice is you have to say something, speak something all the time. That itself is a problem. Forget about the voice cloning that is happening around. But just in order to initiate, like Alexa, we want to say something, we have to initiate, we have to say something. Then only the initiation will take place. Or if I have to continuously monitor and authenticate through voice, then continuously from time to time, I have to say something, probably which that is something that the elderly people or disabled people would not want to do. So if that is the case, what is the best way? So one of the things that we were discussing, exploring, and doing a PPIE interaction with them, one of the things is, let me not carry anything. Can you still authenticate me? Let me walk around. Can you still authenticate me? So one of the best way that we are looking at the moment is trying to understand in the form of gate. So when we talk about the gate, one of the probably the future way of looking is something like they will. And another one very interesting thing is when you are collecting, like I don't want you to collect my whole data, my face, my video all the time. I want you to collect data, but can you still recognize and verify me without taking my facial data recorded all the time? So one of the solution which was very popular among the group of people that we were interacting with. So we say, okay, what about gate? And then we say, oh, what kind of gate data can we fit in? Do we fit in through a smartwatch? Then they say, if I don't want to wear it, you are forcing me. So don't you have a way where the robot will look at me and trying to understand my gait? So one of the ways we look at is, okay, that's very interesting. So we will try to look at the way how the MoveNet has applied with all the 17 data points of the body and try to understand how you're moving, and let's see if it works. And it's very interesting. Like it has we were trying with all the possible six models, and then trying to test with around seven machine learning techniques, and the neural network was coming out very successful, and the detection rate within a range of 0. 0.9 second to 1.1 second with the system that we are running. It's a very high config system. It was responding within approximately around 1 second, be able to verify with an accuracy of approximately 99.86. So I said, that's amazing. So probably this is a way forward which doesn't involve an intrusive way of collecting data, or which doesn't involve the user supplying the data, but is the robot capable of looking and verify who the user is as the person is walking. And the interesting thing about the MoveNet is it doesn't matter whether you are moving backward or front. It will collecting those 17 data points. So he will remember if it's not in the front side, even if you turn back side, he will do an approximation and calculate where your eye and nose and your mouth should be, or your ear should be. So it's a very interesting mechanism, and looks like that's the kind of thing that we should look forward to make it really adoptable in the environment and people that we are talking about, especially in the care and elderly section of the society. Uh, In general, so we are looking for a solution that is obviously user friendly, things that is probably difficult to replicate. So it should not be something we use this biometric related data, but should not be something that can be replicated easily. Probably if we talk about the fingerprint, as you can imagine, even our face, like if we have the, if we touch something, the fingerprint can be collected and it can be replicated. And very interesting, if even with the face recognition, we were trying to different techniques and trying to understand even a printed, picture and faces, can the machine learning still recognize as the concerned individual? And it does very successfully. So that's a bit scary. It's so good that it is even recognizing when it is being printed on a piece of paper. So we have to think of a way on understanding, detecting. It's not about just scanning our face coming in front of the camera. Or, it should be more than that. Understanding it is a printed page, understanding it's a real human being. Probably heat sensing use, trying to understand, am I scanning from a real human face, and so on. So there are a lot of things that we have to understand. Also using a depth camera, trying to understand, the facial structure in terms of, not just a 2D print, but a 3D print data being collected by the system. So there are a lot of interesting stuff that needs to be considered in order to really make, this system safe to adopt in terms of the verification process. And the more interesting, I would say, is like when we think of this controlling the access, like so we were talking and having a bit of a fun. So you say, how do I even understand that the interaction that I'm going to do is going to be, like, is it safe? Like if there is a children, it might not be appropriate, and probably the environment in which I'm going to say what I'm going to say is not appropriate. So what do I even mean by appropriate? Now, the understanding the context become very difficult and very challenging. And then if you think about, let's say, children, it's like if you base on the size, there are small people, probably like a midget, just 3 feet or 4 feet, and are you going to consider them as children? So how do you define a children? The presence of children, to say it is not appropriate, so that you don't say certain things that you were supposed to say. So when we talk about this access control, what information do we spit out? At what level do we spit out? Or what kind of information? In a structured data set, it's very easy, but in an unstructured data set, it becomes very challenging because we have to understand the context so that we don't end up giving out information that is not relevant, or we don't leaking out information which is not supposed to be leaked out, depending on whom you are dealing with. Things that you were supposed to say to the doctor should not be revealed probably to a nurse, or to a carer, or to a friend, or to a stranger. So it's very interesting once we start looking into this access control environment, because not only just understanding the level of access based on role and activity, we have to understand, one more step behind. And if it is a video, if it is a voice, again, that is another different dynamics altogether to understand, what data is appropriate, what data is relevant, and what data is fitting to the context of what the information request is being made, and so on. So in general, I think I will wrap up here. In general, what I understand is in order to make it safe. So when I say safe, I'm not talking in terms of the, kill code, or a kill button, but it's more of, service and data safety. So if we don't have this mechanism in place, then what will happen is it will not become adoptable, or it may have all the amazing function, it may have all the amazing services, but people might not want to use it because they might not feel safe, because the data is kind of being breached, or the data is leaking out wherever they go, or is leaking out to the wrong person, to the wrong individual, giving out to the wrong unauthorized person, and then not understanding the context will lead to inappropriate data disclosure, depending on the place and depending on what information he is sharing and with whom he is sharing, and so on. So I think I will wrap up there. Thank you very much for your time.